Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you for joining me. This is episode 4, part 2 for Benjamin Franklin of the Founding Fathers Discovery Series with Healing Disclosures with Nicole. So, as you know, if you've watched any of the previous Founding Fathers videos, there's always another side. There's always another side. And I want to just say this clearly. While I come to the information that I share with you multiple ways, some of it is by textbooks, some of it is by searches, some of it is by channeling the spirit. Some of it is just really the claircognizant ability that I have. Information just drops into my being and I just know it. And I don't have the context to really say, oh, I knew that from blah, 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 right? And so that's the thing. When the information drops in, it's stunning sometimes, but it resonates at the same time. I didn't go looking for a lot of this information. It really just came to me. And what we know at this time, March of 2024, is that people, the very small group of people that have been making decisions for the masses for the last several thousand years, have had the same agenda. They've really had the same playbook, and they really do have the same rules. And so we see a lot of commonality. The people that had power and the people that had position had the same, many of them had the same deviant ways, and it was accepted. In fact, it was considered an honor, I'll say. Now we know what we know. And in order to share the truth and have true disclosure, we have to open our minds up to realizing that we were all lied to on a massive scale. And it came to us by every direction: government, banking, education, healthcare, religion, all funneled the same narratives to us. So use your discernment. I want you to really think about things and not in a mind space, because the mind is the most manipulated organ that us humans have. I want you to open your heart space, and I want you to really, truly go deep within, because that's where the truth lies in your soul. And feel it. Feel the resonate of the true statements. And if it doesn't resonate, it's not for you. That's okay. Let it go. So I shall begin. Ben Franklin, episode 4, part 2, Founding Fathers Discovery Series. So Ben Franklin lived most of his time in London at 36 Craven Street from 1757 to 1775, while titled as Chief Colonial Diplomat. So he had all these positions I mentioned in part 1. He had all these positions, and he established all of this in Pennsylvania. He was based in Philadelphia. But as a young man in his 20s, he went to London, and he penned several letters that he wanted to spend the rest of his days there. And it's documented that from 1757 to 1775, he spent a total of 18 months in the Americas. So London and the colonies considered Ben Franklin a scientist, a diplomat, a publisher, an author, a philosopher, and an inventor. Ben Franklin represented the Assembly of Pennsylvania officially, and Ben Franklin began visiting London in the 1720s. So again, he was a young man when he started visiting London. The home on 36 Craven Street belonged to a woman named Margaret Stevenson. She had it as a boarding house, and she was the innkeeper, but it was her home. Ben Franklin rented a room there in his initial visit to London. And shortly after that, he took dominion over the home and kept her on as a innkeeper. And there are documents that refer to them as a platonic family. She had a daughter named Polly, and they refer to him as her father figure. The home, owned by Margaret Stevenson, developed this platonic relationship with Ben Franklin, and they made this home as their main home and his main base. He was described as fatherly and very committed to this platonic relationship. Now, his known wife was Deborah Reed. She was in the colony and mostly by herself. This home sits today in the same spot along the River Thames and near the British Parliament, now as a museum to Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin aligned northern colonies to join the allegiance of Great Britain. He was a great advocate for the British crown, and he wanted very much for the people of the northern colonies, the northern territory of the Americas, to align with the British crown. He represented officially Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Georgia in London. And this continued as long as it was beneficial for Ben Franklin. In the early 1775, those state governors of Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Georgia all denied Ben Franklin access to the proceedings while claiming his efforts in London was to live off the title and have access to elites in London as he only visited the Americas 18 months between 1757 and 1775. So if you had an elected official to represent your state, to act on your behalf, to create and help create, be the voice of the state for policy that affected you and the Americas, your taxes, what you had access to, your livelihood, and that being physically lived in another country, would you feel that they were actually, acting on your best behalf? And there was a lot of communication about what he did in his spare time. So while he loved to portray that he was always working and staying busy in his endeavors for the states, for the colonies, inventing and whatnot, he spent a lot of time partying, and he spent a lot of time doing things other than advocating for the states' independence. When Benjamin Franklin was seen as opposition to Great Britain's power, an arrest warrant was issued, and only then did he return to the Americas under duress. The restoration of 36 Craven Street began in 1998 by a group called the Friends of Benjamin Franklin House. During excavation, 28 skeletal remains were found in the basement. 6 to 10 were possibly children. They were incomplete. There were bone fragments, broken bones, and then there were complete skeletal remains of children as well. Testing of the remains dated them back 200-ish years, meaning they were buried in the basement during the time that Benjamin Franklin lived at 36 Craven Street. The Hellfire Club is one of Benjamin Franklin's main interests in London. The Hellfire Club was an exclusive name for several clubs for high society, British and Ireland. in the 18th century. Founded in London in 1718 by Philip Wharton, who was the first Duke of Wharton. The first Duke of Wharton, Mr. Philip Wharton, was known for being a man of letters during the day and a drunken rioter infidel by night. Yeah. The name Hellfire Club most commonly refers to Francis Dashwood's Order of the Friars of St. Francis of Wycombe. Regular meetings in London were held from 1749 to 1760. The names of the clubs and what they were up to are very hard to come by. Secret society stuff, right? These clubs were viewed as meeting places for persons of high quality. And I refer you back to part 1, where Benjamin Franklin developed his 13 virtues. He self-proclaimed his self. And I think a lot of these people proclaimed that they were high quality when they were really just a part of the elites. High quality, who wished to take part in socially immoral acts, with members often being involved in politics, which makes documented evidence of the members and their activities very hard to get your hands on. The Hellfire Club is also associated with the Order of the Second Circle, which refers to Dante's second circle of hell and all sins related to lust. Today, 2024, there is a corporation under the name the Order of the Second Circle. Registry company number 08092876. Address of said company 950 North Washington Street, Alexandria, Virginia. Right next to DC, right? Interesting. According to Mark Blackett Ford, the Hellfire Club members gathered to ridicule religion, with a trend in England of contemporary blasphemy. The president of the Hellfire Club is known as the Devil. The members call themselves devils. Another astonishing fact in Wharton's clubs admitted men and women. This was never before done. According to members, they met at various locations around London on Sundays to mock religious ceremonies. Theirs were named Holy Ghost Pie, Breast of Venus, Devil's Loin, and they did all of their acts while drinking something they called Hellfire Punch. In 1721, Wharton's clubs ended when King George I, who used the details of the immorality of Wharton to remove him from Parliament. Wharton then became a Freemason in 1721. And in 1 year, 1722, he became Grand Master Freemason of England. Now, this is all my opinion going forward, based on my intuition, my divination, and my claircognizance. So if you want to say it's for entertainment purposes only, let's do that. Ben Franklin was a sexual deviant who was greatly conflicted between his own 13 values that he developed as a child, and he himself admitted that he fell short of most of the time, and the innate internal drive of perversion. It is my belief that the negative programming that aligned him to satanic acts and deviant acts, including torture and killing of other humans in his presence, were characteristically of an organic portal. I believe that Benjamin Franklin was indeed born an organic portal, which means he has a negative AI control, very dark, very low vibration, and only has a lower 3 chakras. Ben Franklin was an organic portal. He struggled to connect anything higher consciousness, although he was very intelligent. It has never been said that evil was stupid. Okay, they are very intelligent beings. They're usually fed very highly technological information. They're usually of science and therefore are cultivated in certain arenas and areas where they are able to thrive. It has nothing to do with IQ. This is completely different. We're talking about your soul status, your ability to connect to source energy and light and love and unity, and not doing the things that they did for fun. I believe that he lived most of his life as that tortured soul, that conflicted soul, that outwardly he wanted people to believe the best of him, and he had great acts. And I do mean that in the literal term. He was acting great. He was acting benevolent. When deep down, what he did for fun, what really occupied the majority of his life was deviant acts. I believe he voluntarily became a vampire. I believe that he was turned while he was in London, and that is why he loved to spend his time there. Becoming a blood-raged killer with centuries worth of secrets of those elites, royals, and politicians gave him the protection by the royal family, the bloodline families. The being we know as Benjamin Franklin became reborn as a vampire, and roughly 100 years later, which is still very young in vampire terms, the royals were struggling to control that being. And that is evidenced by the killings on the street known as Jack the Ripper killings. Those were happening around 1888. So roughly 100 years after the passing of the being we saw as Ben Franklin, he was absolutely the same being. Now, the process of molecular process, cellular process that occurs with vampires are that they reverse aging. If they're already adults, they look much, much, much younger and have very, very pronounced strength. Their heart beats, but it beats minimally, like 4 to 6 times an hour. And they are considered the undead, right? Because their wounds heal almost immediately. So he could quite literally be the same being, the same brain, the same knowledge, all the dirt on all these beings from long ago that have been kept secret and protected by the royal as Jack the Ripper. His new identity, I'm not exactly sure what he presented himself to be, but in that century, there was no connection to him as Ben Franklin, because it was assumed that Ben Franklin had died. The being thrived for many centuries in London and is still there today. The course, if you want to call it, the time span for blood rage and newly turned vampires that tend to not have good foundation, and their sire does not really teach them the ways of the vampire. They struggle, but that usually gets under control after 100, 150 years or so. And so he quite actually just grew out of it. That's why the Jack the Ripper killings seem to go away. Again, we see the deviant seek protection and status within the Freemasons. There was almost half of the Freemasons at the time were deviants. And when I say half, I mean the ones that, of all the signers of the Declaration of Independence, about half, 21 or so, were Freemasons, and about half of those were deviants, hiding behind the protection that being a Freemason afforded: secrecy and the brotherhood. The others, like George Washington, were there to balance the power of light and dark. The battle has always been between light, aligned to source creator, beings with a soul, versus dark, aligned to Satan and the devil, beings without a soul or with a dark soul, without the ability to connect to source. There's a lot of different variations of darkness. It doesn't fall into one category. But there's only one category of being that falls under the light category, and they are souled. They have a soul that is not distorted and full of darkness. They're 100% connected to source creator. That's why they used to outnumber us, and they really do outnumber us in this dimension, but in the higher dimensions, they can't exist because of the frequency. From this time, controllers took over with collaboration of the Anunnaki to create a slave race. And they perpetuated that for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But now that has been cleansed to a great extent. But the timeline for the lower dimensions will stay duality. 3D, third dimension, Earth stays in a duality state. That means that there's always going to be good versus evil. There's always going to be light versus dark until that no longer exists. Higher frequency, which occurs with your ascension process, elevates you up and out of lower dimensions. So, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, you can rise above the lower vibrational states that always accompany deviant behavior. Our founding fathers were mostly maladjusted. A lot of them were playing both sides against the middle. Another fun fact about Benjamin Franklin is he was trying to advocate early on for the alignment of the colonists with the British, but the colonists were developing their own militia, and he was actually working both sides against the middle and caught by George Washington. He was caught doing that by George Washington. And so it was another reason why he stayed in London, because George Washington knew what was up. So understanding that if this goes back as far as you can find it, as far as you can look, light versus dark, good versus evil, and light, source light, and love always wins. Thank you for joining me today for episode 4, part 2, Benjamin Franklin Discovery series of our founding fathers, this United States of America. I'll talk to you next time.